Welcome to God We Trusted. I'm your host, Will. I'm here alongside Sam. Sam, what are we talking about today?
So today we're going to be talking about a tale of two revolutions, and we're going to pit the American Revolution up against the French Revolution because I think there's some really important things to mine about worldview and how we approach the world from a biblical perspective or an atheist perspective. And these experiments, right? The French Revolution, which was trying to pursue the object of liberty, and the American Revolution that was trying to do the same thing across the ocean, both of these start at the same time, coming at the goal from two entirely different foundations, and you see how they play out. And I think there's a lot to learn from it.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to put them up against each other because, same time, same hope, very different ways of going about it and very different outcomes, which is blatantly clear about why what happened.
That's right. So if you're walking around in France at this particular time in the late 1700s through the mid 1700s, you live in a culture where the church authentically is pretty oppressive. Like if you publish things that are against the church, there's huge consequences. It stifles free speech. It is going after those things. And so if you're in the French libertarian mindset, you immediately have this idea that the church is bad for freedom. It's bad for liberty. And so everything that you're going to see come out of the French Revolution is like, okay, if we want liberty, what do we have to get rid of? The church, God, religion. It all has to go. But over in America, they have a different understanding where it's like, okay, well, we have the whole point of the reason why we started, in large part at least, was the pursuit of religious freedom. So people are free to worship as they choose, but we are going to base our entire system of liberty, our entire system of government on the idea that our rights come from God. We're doubling down on the idea of religion. And so you see one experiment entirely built upon the idea that your rights come from God, and the other experiment saying in order for us to get liberty, we have to tear down all of the vestiges of God and get rid of them entirely. How do they play out? That's what I want to look at.
Okay, so you talked about the French Revolution and the whole idea of get rid of God. So who are the guys behind it? Who are the thought provokers that are saying, okay, let's go this route?
Well, you have the guys that actually lead the French Revolution, but before them, you have some names that are laying the foundation in France for this kind of revulsion against the idea of religion. So let's look at a few of them. One of them's name is Rousseau. You could learn a lot about Rousseau. I think he's a terrible philosopher. He's essentially like feelings become important. He believes that man is basically good and institutions and society corrupts us, which is totally unbiblical. He would deny the idea that you're born with original sin and those things. But he also has a lot of animosity toward Christianity growing up in that world. I'll give you some of his quotes, right? He says, I had been brought up in a church which decides everything and permits no doubts, so that having rejected one article of faith, I was forced to reject the rest. And so he's growing up again, and what does religion represent for him?
Oppression.
It's stifling. It's too much. You can't have your own opinions. And he goes on and he says, Christianity preaches only servitude and dependence. Its spirit is so favorable to tyranny that it always profits by such a regime. And so he goes on and talks about how religion presents these laws, and it's only these laws, like it invents this morality. Why do we accept it? We should have our own morality. Each person should kind of have their own thing, right? Like, why do we accept this oppressive thing that comes over us and makes us feel bad? And he says we should do well to inquire if these evils did not spring up with the laws themselves. In other words, all these things that we consider wrong are only wrong because we said the Bible has said they're wrong. Like there's no basis to call that wrong. We should make up our own morality as we go, and we should do it together. We should all be free. We should overthrow religion because it breeds oppression and all these things. And so one of the big things that you find in Rousseau's writings is talking about the general will. In other words, truth is not fixed and absolute. It is on the whims of what the general will is.
Like the populace.
Today, if we feel like doing this, that's morality. And if we feel like doing this, that's morality. And we all have to covenant together to bring this about. Now, here's another interesting thing about Rousseau. He hates religion, right?
Yeah.
So he's probably the dominant French philosopher that's going to pave the way toward the French Revolution. But he recognizes, and he says this, no state has ever been founded without religion at its base. So he's looking back and he's like, everything, Rome, Greece, Babylon, all of them, they've all had Egypt, they've all had religion at the base, like the leaders appeal to the gods. He's like, so we do need to have a religion, so he offers and creates something called a civil religion, where there's no God by name. It's just, there's something out there. We'll not give it a name, but it'll just be something, and we'll all have our rituals because people kind of need those. But it's not Christianity, it's not Islam, it's nothing that's by name. It all centers around the state, and then he defines it, right? This is what our chief mantra, our dogma is. He says, as for the negative dogmas, I would limit them to one single doctrine. You ready for it?
Yeah.
No intolerance. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Like
Thought that was a modern idea, not Rousseau.
That's Rousseau. That's what sparks the French Revolution. Like, you can't tell me I can't do anything. Like, I'm getting rid of the oppressive structures that surround me. The only thing that's not tolerable is intolerance, right?
Yeah.
Which is ironic. He says, intolerance is something which belongs to the religions which we have rejected. It is impossible to live in peace with people one believes to be damned. And so he goes on this crusade of saying we got to get rid of religion and absolutes and the structures above us. Man is basically good. Let him run, get rid of all these things. He's basically the proto-communist, essentially. And the idea of the French Revolution was very much built on three words: liberty, equality, and fraternity. And that would be their mottos all the time. Then you had a guy named Voltaire. Voltaire's famous French philosopher. We're not going to get into much of what he said, but I want you to understand why Voltaire hated religion. Because I think there's something for us to learn in this. We don't want to create more Voltaires, but listen to this. In Voltaire's day, the French monarchy and the Catholic Church didn't just target Protestants. They targeted all religious minorities, including atheists. So in 1766, 3 decades before the Revolution, Jean-François de la Barre, an atheist, was accused of showing disrespect toward Catholicism by singing blasphemous songs and defecating on a crucifix. So he sounds like a pleasant guy, right?
I wasn't ready for defecating.
Right? Weird thing. Well, the court forced him to confess his crimes, then had his tongue cut out.
All right, that seems like an overstep.
Whoa. Then ordered that he have his head cut off on a scaffold. His body and head will then be thrown on a pyre to be destroyed, burnt, reduced to ashes, and then these will be thrown to the wind. And then, as a warning to Voltaire and other atheists, the court ordered Voltaire's philosophical dictionary to be thrown by the executor on the same pyre as the body, which sent a message to Voltaire: you come back where we can arrest you, guess what's going to happen to you?
Yeah.
It's all these same things. So Voltaire's like, whoa, the church and the government working together, this is not good, this is oppressive, this is not conducive to liberty. And he comes and says this: Christianity is the most ridiculous, the most absurd and bloody religion that has ever infected the world.
So he had strong feelings.
Yeah, he's not a fan. He's definitely not a fan. And to be honest, if I lived under this brand of religion, I don't think I'd be a fan either.
Yeah, fairly understandable.
Right? Like, I'd be like, whoa, this is oppressive. It is gross. It is, it's certainly not conducive to liberty. So we hit two. We hit Rousseau. We hit Voltaire. Here's another one, and I'm only throwing him in because his line is so rabid that it's like, holy smokes. But this guy's Denis Diderot, another thinker right before the French Revolution. I mean, he died in 1784, 5 years before the French Revolution. But he said this: man will never be free until the last king is strangled with the entrails of the last priest. Dang. In other words, we need to stamp out the monarchy
And
by stamping out the religion, right? So this is the ethos that's brewing in France. You have an oppressive church that's done some bad things, that oversteps, that is not conducive to liberty, and you have these people going, God is the problem.
And we need to stomp it out ourselves.
We're going to crush it. And so then you get the guy who's usually considered the most responsible for the French Revolution, Maximilien Robespierre. And he says this: if the basis of popular government in peacetime is virtue, then the basis of popular government during a revolution is virtue and terror. Virtue, without which terror is baneful, terror, without which virtue is powerless. What in the world did he just say? He's saying normally, like in America, let me give you the contrast. In America, where did they think virtue came from? Religion.
No.
Like what you believe about ultimate things ultimately fashions the way that you live, right? Our founders said things like man will either be governed by a power within or a power without, like talking about the government, either by the Bible or the bayonet, our founder said. So in French culture, it was like, no, it's not religion. Morality does not come from religion. Morality comes from terror. This is actually the word he uses, right?
Yeah.
You know, the French word, but it's actually the word he uses. Like, why are people going to be virtuous? Why are they going to comply with this? Because if they don't, they're going to die.
happen, yeah.
They're going to die. And so everybody's going to come kumbaya into this new system of liberty or we'll kill them. Like they will be compelled to this. And that's exactly the way the French Revolution started, because otherwise, how do you compel them? This is like going back to communism. When Marx writes about communist revolutions and getting rid of God because he's an obstacle to what we're trying to accomplish, he's like, it's going to require revolution. It's going to be violent. Like there's going to be some broken eggs here. Like we're going to have to kill some people to bring this about. Like nobody hides that. At the beginning of the French Revolution, you have its founder being like, yeah, terror is coming. We're going to bring this. And if you stand in our way, you should be terrorized. It's like, oh boy, can't wait for liberty, you know, because like if you have somebody who's presenting that, like I'm going to get my way or you're going to be terrorized, do you feel like they're doing the same thing that the Catholic Church was doing? You either abide by what we say or
chop out your tongue and chop off your head, then burn you for some reason.
Which is virtue by terror. Mm-hmm. And then he comes and goes, no, I got a better idea. How about virtue by terror?
I'm just going to be in charge of it.
Right. I get to determine who's terrorized. And so one of the things that is not taught enough when we learn about the French Revolution, if we learn about the French Revolution in school, I don't know if you were taught
I don't think I did.
But they began a very systematic program of de-Christianizing France.
That's the first step.
First step. I mean, and they went all in. So like I'm just going to walk through some things and we'll see like, okay, great. This is the atheistic experiment. You know, we're going to see how this works out. 1790, 1 year after it starts, the civil constitution of the clergy comes along, and it made all clergy employees of the government's new civil religion. So if you were a priest of the Catholic Church, if you were a minister in a Protestant religion, if you still want to be clergy, guess what religion you're going to advocate for?
The government's.
The government's civil religion. And if not, you're going to be arrested, jailed, murdered. It outlawed the collections of tithes by the church. So the Catholic Church, 10% of income given to support the works of ministry, outlawed. The church is no longer allowed to collect money. They seized and sold all the properties owned by the Catholic Church, which at this time, 6.5% of all of France was owned by the Catholic Church.
And they took it.
All the schools, all the seminaries, all the churches now became government property. Their hospitals, their monasteries, their convents, public services, gone and seized by the church or by the state. Then they start persecuting the church. Death sentences on any defiant clergyman. They forced churches to close that wouldn't go along. They outlawed religious education in the schools, except for the new civil religion. And they had statues throughout France that were religious of saints or Jesus or anything. They're all decapitated to remind them of Marie Antoinette's fate, who was beheaded, right? And so it was like, warning, if you go down this road, you're going to lose your head. So 24 statues outside Notre Dame Cathedral destroyed. And the goddess Reason, they had a statue for the goddess Reason enthroned inside Notre Dame Cathedral as like a provocative, dancers all around it and everything else. So it's like,
this is our God now.
Yeah. We don't believe in your stupid fairy tale God. We've got reason, right? And that's going to be a big word in the French Revolution. We've got reason now. We know things. We don't need religion. And so the new French government abolished the Gregorian calendar, imposed a 10-day week instead of 7. Why? Where's the 7-day week come from?
Creation.
It's creation. It's a biblical thing. Well, no, we're not doing that anymore. 10-day week. We're getting rid of everything biblical. They create this absurd, it's literally called the Festival of the Supreme Being. It's like no name to it or anything, But we acknowledge there has to be, it's like an agnostic thing. Like there's something out there, we'll just call it a generic. And so they have a festival of the Supreme Being, which sounds like Festivus or something.
North Korean holiday.
It really, like it's true. So they launched the Reign of Terror, which was the plan all along. And there was such an extreme bloodlust. And you had the guillotine, which became famous during this, where they would whoosh and chop off heads. Estimated 16,594 people were officially put to death. At least 12,000 people were murdered without a trial. 10,000 people were left to die in prison. And in 1794, the guy that was like considered the leader of the French Revolution, guess what happened to him? He lost his head in the guillotine. And that's the way that these godless revolutions always work. Like they eventually turn and they eat their master. Mm-hmm. And then it just continues. Like it's a continual cycle of devouring everything. And so the hilarious, tragic part of this French Revolution is you have a bunch of people who come together and they're like, we feel oppressed, right? We feel oppressed by the monarchy. We feel oppressed by the church. So we're going to overthrow it so that we can get real liberty. And it results in bloodshed, revolution after revolution after revolution that ends with Napoleon. So it's like, yeah, we don't want a tyrant. We don't want someone who singularly holds all the power. And where does it end? It ends with Napoleon, who seizes power in a coup d'etat and then launches on all of Europe one of the greatest invasions that ends up with 3.5 million Europeans dead in the Napoleonic Wars that he brings it about, which makes it almost the same casualty rate if you adjust for populations that you saw in World War I. This is all because of the instability of France, which rejected God and launched all these bloody revolutions thinking, I can get liberty if I just get rid of God and his absolute truths. That will bring about this wonderful utopia of brotherhood and equality and liberty. And they got none of them. There was no brotherhood. There was no equality. There was no liberty. When they expelled God, the nation became just an upheaval, convulsing from one bloody movement to the next.
So that's the French Revolution. No matter what we remember about it, no matter what we look back, it's bloody. It's one filled with terror. And the cause is that it was one without God specifically. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is, there's another revolution going on in America around the same time that is very different in almost all aspects.
Yeah, that's right. George Washington's first year as president was the year the French Revolution started.
Okay.
He's president for 8 years, and when he leaves, he takes a shot at the French in his farewell address. Remember what was enthroned in Notre Dame Cathedral?
The goddess of reason.
Reason. That's their word. They love reason. And this is what Washington says. He says, reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle. So what is Washington saying? He's like, never in America do we want to get rid of religion. That's the basis of morality. In France, they want virtue by terror. In America, we want virtue by religion. We want to promote that, right? You have guys like Alexander Hamilton that's looking at the French Revolution, and he calls it a disgusting spectacle. And listen to what he writes. Like when he's condemning it, this is what he says. The attempt by the rulers of a nation to destroy all religious opinion and to pervert a whole nation to atheism is a phenomenon of wickedness. To establish atheism on the ruins of Christianity is to deprive mankind of its best consolations and most animating hopes and to make a gloomy desert of the universe. Like all of the founders that were speaking up against the French Revolution, they were like, you can't do that. Like, this is going to be bloody. It's going to be awful. We can never do that in America. We always have to have God as our core. Like, he is the basis of everything we're building here. He's the source of our morality. He's the source of our liberty. Everything we do is based on that. Like, everything. And you have a guy, a French historian, who comes over in 1835 to write about our prison system. Very famous author named Alexis de Tocqueville. And he comes over from France. So he's witnessed all this stuff. He's witnessed what they've done. And he's seen like the animosity toward religion. And listen to what he says when he comes to America and writes. He writes a book called Democracy in America. And he says, quote, "The Americans combine the notions of Christianity and of liberty so intimately in their minds that it is impossible to make them conceive of the one without the other. And with them, this conviction does not spring from that barren traditionary faith which seems to vegetate rather than to live in the soul. So what is he looking at? He's leaving France with all of its Catholicism and rituals and smells and bells and all that other stuff. And he's like, nobody believes it. Nobody loves Jesus. There's no personal relationship over there. And what does it result in? It results in oppression. It's just used for power grabs. But over here in America, like, it doesn't just vegetate. It lives in the soul. Like, it is powerful. And they can't imagine liberty without this idea of a God who loves them, that watches over them, that provides their liberties, that they owe a duty to. It animates everything about them over here. And he's awed by it because he's leaving France. He's never seen that there. But now he's like, no. Like, liberty really does need this. But it needs to be a healthy faith. It cannot be this oppressive, theocratic, power grab kind of faith. It's got to be like, I love Jesus. I want to follow after Jesus. What would he have for us? Kind of devout thing. But without religion, absolute catastrophes happen. And so, I want to close, I guess, with just kind of the four main ideas that you find in America that you don't find in France. And I think we can learn from this, right? So the first one, the most obvious, is, and I use the acronym R.A.I.L, R-A-I-L. And it's a helpful way to remember these. But in America, you had an absolute dependence on religious principles.
Yeah.
We believe that our rights come from God. That's the basis of it. Government exists to secure the blessings of liberty. God is the source of the liberties. We're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, the Declaration says. So it's built on our religion, right? France is like, get rid of it. The next one is absolutes. The Americans believed that there was a truth beyond man's opinion, right? And that it was the duty of good governance to chase after, to find what's true, and then bless the people by conforming to the design of the Creator, right? There are absolutes. What is Rousseau saying? Oh, it's all just so oppressive. Anything that's absolute, it needs to be the general will. We'll figure it out as we go. No, America was like, absolutely not. There are absolutes. There is such a thing as truth. That's number two. The third one is an I, and it's the individual, the rights of the individual, right?
Not the general will.
That's right. The general will, where they would say, like, oh, here's the group, and if you're against it, if you're against where we're going, we're going to terrorize you or decapitate you, or if you stand against what we're trying to do, you're dead. Like, this is like, no. The individual has protections from the mob, right? That's where our Bill of Rights comes from. It's not a permission of, hey, you're allowed, the government's going to allow you to speak. It's like, no, Congress is not allowed to make a law that would impede on your right to worship or to speak or to publish things into press or to own weapons, or, you go down the line. The individual matters in America. In France, it was the general will, like under the guise of liberty. But here it's like, no. The individual matters because every single person is made in the image of God. They cannot have their rights taken away without due process. You have an absolute right to life, liberty, and due process. Like, all of that was absolutely foundational in America. France, not so much. And then the last one is limited government. The whole basis of the Constitution was not to give a government that can be big enough to build this utopian society that the French were looking at, like, oh, we're going to be this great brother and the government's going to make it happen and it's going to be so empowered that it can just oppress whoever stands in its way. The Leviathan, they used to say, is going to be so big and powerful and unrestrained that it'll be able to do whatever it wants. In America, they were like, oh, dear Lord, no. Like, we do not want a Leviathan that's unrestrained, that can go and oppress people and have the power to do whatever it wants. So they wrote a constitution that said, we're going to limit it in a million different ways. To pass a law, you need to have these people and checks and balances and separation of powers and so many other things. I mean, and a constitution that says government may not do this. You read the Bill of Rights. It's government may not do this. 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 Where the French were like, let's build something and set it free to go do all these things. Our founders were like, protect the individual and restrain the government. Mm-hmm. That was the path to liberty. When you put those together, a dependence on religious ideals, God is the source of liberty. God is the source of truth. We have a duty to God, right? Not the government. Government's not giving you your liberties. God is. Next one, A, absolutes. There is a truth beyond our opinions. We don't just go find it and
Figure it
whims
out,
and
yeah.
everything else. Like, there is a designer behind all this. And our job is to conform to the designer's will, right? Which is biblical ideas, natural law. The next one, rights of the individual. Like, the mob doesn't have sway over the individual. And then lastly, we're going to restrain the government. When you look at those two experiments running side by side on train tracks right next to each other, the French said, we don't need any of those. Rail, psh, we're going off the rails.
We're going on terror.
We're going off the rails. We're rejecting God. But all those same ethics are behind Marxism and communism and socialism, and they always end the same way. Every time they're tried in humanity's history, it always ends with the marginalized being exploited, run down, starved, and America saying, no, we're going to build a society that's based on biblical truths. We recognize the fallen nature of humanity, that no one can be trusted with power, that our rights come from God. Like, when that was tried, it unleashed the most successful constitutional republic in the history of the world. And I would say for the last 60 years or so, we have been veering away from it. Like, well, let's remove God as the basis of things. Well, the individual, that's kind of uncomfortable. So let's take those rights away. Let's unleash the government to do more and to grow its budget. Everything that made America wonderful and set apart in the history of the world, we're now looking at and being like, maybe we should be a little bit more like the French. And I just want to say, no. Learn from history and get back to the ideals that made the nation flourish. If you love your neighbor, you want your neighbor to live in a government that's going to allow for his flourishing. That doesn't happen in these oppressive regimes. It happens in a regime, whereas de Tocqueville said, there's a faith that's not just vegetative, it lives. And liberty is so intertwined with that you can't see one without the other. That's what I would love to see. And I think one of the things that we're going to do in a lot of these episodes is look back at historical examples to show that biblical wisdom works, right?
It's wisdom for a reason.
It's wisdom for a reason. There's a great Greek historian, whose name was Thucydides, and one of his lines, it's one of my very favorite ways of seeing history and philosophy all tied together. But he says, history is philosophy teaching by example, right? So when you come across an idea and you're like, hey, what if we tried this? The best thing you can do is to go back in history and say, like, did someone try this before us?
Yeah, how'd it work out?
Right, if you don't learn from history, what's the line? Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So let's go back in history. Have we tried this before? Like, have we tried a society that walks away from God? Have we tried all these things? How did it work out? Have we seen societies that draw near to the Lord with vibrant faith? Like, how did that work out? And then map our course forward by looking at what has been before. And that's what I wanted to do today. Let's not go to the French Revolution. Let's renew the beautiful things about the American Revolution. And I think that's where we will end for today. All right, I want to thank you so much for watching. Join us next time on In God We Trust.